G'day people and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Night Live, brought to you by CrowCast, of course, as well as our good friends at Smith Partners Real Estate up there at Golden Grove for all your buying, selling and rental needs, as well as down-to-earth electrical, our great mate Scorpus on Hardware Unboxed, and our wonderful patrons who support us on Patreon every month. G'day to everyone on Spreaker and welcome to my cohorts. Nikki, how you going, Nick?
I'm going very well.
Good to hear. And Peter J, how are you?
I'm absolutely travelling beautifully. Fiend, I've got a mate who's just moved over to England and he was trying to clear out some of his stuff, so he rolled up yesterday with a brand new unopened bottle of Johnny Walker Gold Label Reserve Scotch. So I've just got a little bit of that in the glass at the moment.
Thank you very
perfect.
much. Good work. I'd just like to point out to people that we don't sit in the same room and do this podcast, and at the moment I'm regretting that terribly. Anyway, look, big show as usual, so let's get on with it with a bit of news, shall we? Hit us, Mr. Walker.
Well, much to the distress of our absent co-host, I should say, Donkey Magoo, and the great grand final winning captain Cole Cheney, we find out that AFLX is a bust. It's not going on anymore. So the AFL have pulled the pin on AFLX. Nikki.
2 years. It lasted 2 years and it was gone. It was ridiculous because I think when they announced it the first year, everybody saw the writing on the wall and just went, well, this is stupid. You've already got a 9 competition. Just play AFL 9s. So they've spent how much money and gave us Zupa Dupas and whatever else. But, you know, we did have an Adelaide Football Club premiership in 2017.
Oh, well, you know, at least we were the inaugural. At least it was something. It gave us a glimmer just for a moment, and certainly extended Cole Cheney's career, you would have thought.
Would have thought so, but we'll give that about as much time as it deserves. AFLX, it's just it's rubbish.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Once again, we find ourselves front and centre in the news, particularly issues surrounding Josh Jenkins and his omission on the weekend. There was some scuttlebutt flying around on social media that he was identified as a leaker of information to, in particular, Caroline Wilson, and then on Footy Classified, she has come out and mentioned that there's a lot of issues at the Adelaide Football Club relating to Josh Jenkins, and the fact that she confirmed that is the case, that they suspect that he has been leaking to the media. Any comment on that?
Well, she's the beneficiary, isn't she?
Well, she's the beneficiary, yeah.
You never reveal your source.
Well,
Never reveal your source.
I think it was Jenkins.
She didn't reveal... Yeah, I don't think she revealed the source as such, but she just reported the fact that she never mentioned that he was her source, but just the fact that it had happened. And so, yeah, that seems... And the fact that the whole axing of Josh Jenkins this week has been personal.
Yeah. Look, where there's smoke, there's always fire, Peter. It always works out that way, doesn't it? Every whisper we get, there ends up being elements of truth to it, and whilst we're not close enough to really know the full extent, you can usually join the dots. And it was an unusual omission because Josh hadn't been the worst, no. Albeit I think we benefited from him not being in the team structurally, but on just the basis of form, it was a surprising omission, and surprising also. It's hard to draw a line. We'll know more when the SANFL play this week, because the reports are that he's cleared out his locker and he's buggered off.
Well, yeah, that could quite well be the case as well. Nikki, did you have any thoughts on that one?
Well, we know he didn't react well to his dropping last time. So I do think there is definitely some smoke around it. And he's probably silly enough to not really think through the complete consequences of leaking certain things. So I think that there's definitely some smoke around it that smells a bit true.
Would seem so.
Does a bit, doesn't it?
We'll move on from that. There was an appointment just today. Blake Carosella, the assistant coach at Richmond, has been appointed or has been informed that he's been successful in obtaining the position of assistant coach at the Essendon Football Club. So that's a return home for him, and a very good appointment, I would think, from the Bombers.
Yeah, I would have liked him at Adelaide, actually. We're in desperate need of some experience in that coaching box, and he would have been top of a very short list for mine. And I guess on the issue of assistant coaches, the deadline has actually passed on assistant coaches. Now, you remember that under the AFL Coaches Association rules, I think it's the 1st of August, assistant coaches have to be informed whether they're going to be required for the following season, so that it allows them to move around. So the whole assistant coach space, I think, is going to be very, very interesting over the next month or two.
You're absolutely spot on, and leading on from that, there was the bit of news that hit the airwaves that Michael Voss has sealed the job at Carlton, so that was a bit of scuttlebutt around. Of course, everybody tight-lipped about that, but it was certainly hit the airwaves that he is the front runner for that job.
Michael Voss. What the hell? They finally... Nikki's reaction is the most appropriate reaction to that.
Sorry, does that mean that that scuttlebutt, I think, did it come from Caro last night on Footy Classified or something, which talked about that Pike and the players want Teague back?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Which I thought was really interesting, because wouldn't he be the lead for the Carlton job? But we know Judd doesn't like him. No,
there is an issue there. There is an issue there. And wouldn't it be very Carlton-like to get rid of the first bloke that's shown any semblance of getting that team playing well and put in a bloke like Michael Voss, who I've got to say is my top 3 favourite all-time player. I loved Vossi as a player.
He can't coach.
But he can't coach. It's as simple as that. The history is laid to bear, and if they get him anywhere near Sauce in the recruiting department, that team will be decimated within 5 years again. Oh my goodness! But I mean, that's interesting from our perspective, as you said, Nick, because there's a strong push to get Teague back at the club, and I would suggest that there'd be a strong push to get Teague back at the club in a senior capacity if things go a bit more south. So I just wonder about that. That's very interesting.
And just a little bit of this is just purely self-indulgent. I've been on here before carrying on about Jack Lukosius and the need to get him back. He had an absolutely ripping game on the weekend. I don't know if you saw his stats against Collingwood, 70-point loss to his team, the Gold Coast, but he ended up with 21 possessions, 9 marks, I think it was 7 rebound 50s, 2 inside 50s, went at almost 80% disposal. He is an absolute superstar waiting to happen, and we have just got to do, he hasn't extended, and even though they want him to, we have to do everything that we possibly can to get him back next.
They can have Douglas and Jacobs.
That'll go down a treat.
Yeah, even though he's not needs, Pete.
I do think he's needs, because you need great players.
Absolutely.
He's the same. You know what? He's the same height as Patrick Cripps. He is one of the most beautiful disposers of the ball you'll see, and he can play centre half back. He can play on the wing. I've got no doubt. He's got an engine that can play midfield. He can play centre half forward. He can just play anywhere. He really can, and. You just have to. He's just so. Do you use the word graceful with ball in hand? He really is.
Rolls Royce.
He is a Rolls Royce, and his disposal for a 195 centimetre. He'll just hit you on the chest from 50 metres away. Field kicking like Tex, really. Probably not as hard and punchy as Texas, but just you just got to get him into your club. You just have to. And he's playing centre half back at the moment, and I think that's probably needs based for Gold Coast, and the fact that trying to get a key forward developing in a team like that is pretty difficult. But he played a lot of his junior football at centre half back. He played SANFL football at centre half forward. He's played up in the wing. He's a Rolls Royce, and he'll just find his niche. And he's a leader. The rebuild should be around the likes of Jack Lukosius and Tom Duday. So they're the guys you really want to rebuild your club around. So there's my little bit. So for me, the Carlton pick, Hugh Greenwood, whatever it takes, just send it. Send it to Gold Coast and get him back.
I think he's a very good chance to get him back. It's very interesting, both him and Ben King. Neither of them have signed and put off talks to the end.
Well, why would you, really? I mean, someone's got to send a letter to Isaac Rankin, because what the hell's going on there? But I suspect their tactic of sending his mate up there, is Westie's mate, and I forget his name off the top of my head, has had something to do with Isaac staying up there. Plus,
I think they've got a cousin of his up there as well that he's living with.
So plus a mountain of money.
And he hasn't played a game, and he's injured, and they've offered him a mountain of money.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So if you're his manager, you're saying, look, take it.
Yeah.
So I think that may be the situation there, but. Look, the odds are still always usually with the existing club, particularly as he'll be on contract. So you have to say that it's probably 70-30 against. But Jesus, if there's just even a tiny little space we can put our foot through that door, you've just got to do it.
Well, and contracts are only contracts until they're no longer contracts as well. So I wonder whether they do. Jack and Isaac, even though Isaac's under contract for, say, the two Crouch boys.
Whew, that's a big call.
Well, if you're talking about needs, all negativity about the Crouchers aside, I think we're.
They've got currency.
Well, they've got currency right now. I mean, there was some talk about Brad being traded, or Brad becomes restricted free agent next year anyway. But there's certainly been some interest in Brad from across the border. I don't know whether they'd go to the Gold Coast, those boys, but even if they went to Victoria, you get some tasty stuff coming back the other way that you could on trade. So yeah, I guess that leads into the conversation, Peter, that we really just have to be active this trade period. If we're serious, we have to be active this trade period, don't we?
Yeah, no, we do. And I get the feeling, Nicky, you'd probably know more, but I get the feeling that it'll be an active trade period. I think that there'll be plenty of list decisions made, as particularly if, as we were discussing off air, that the very, very likely situation whereby we miss finals again for the second year running.
Yeah, and there needs to be that little bit of ruthlessness. So it'll keep the fans interested, put it that way.
Yeah. That's about all I had. So anybody want to chip in with anything else?
Collingwood are limping into the finals with Mason Cox now unlikely to play out the rest of the season. He had a detached retina in his eye and he has to go in for surgery. De Goey's not in a rush to get back either. So they're really struggling at the wrong time of the year.
Yeah. And we have them in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, and that might be our only chance to stay in the 8.
Yeah.
I would imagine of the 3 games that we've got left, and Bulldogs are beatable, but Bathurst is not Bathurst. Ballarat's not going to be easy. Collingwood at home probably represents our best opportunity. Oh no, where do we play them?
I think you're right. Here.
Yeah,
it is here. Yeah, that's our best opportunity, I reckon, and we do need at least one more win. Otherwise, we're cooked.
Well, yeah. I mean, we need all three, because if you look at who Port are playing, and the fact that there's now only 2% difference between the two of us, they've got Sydney at home, North Melbourne away, and Fremantle at home. So.
Oh, Pete's disappeared for a moment.
Yes.
Come back, Pete.
The other thing which was just mentioned in the chat is that the AFL has now put an inaugural head of mental health and wellbeing. So Kate Hall was announced in that position, and Ranjit Menon is the new chief psychiatrist. So considering the number of issues we've had this year and a lot more awareness around it, for once that's actually a good thing that the AFL has done.
Well, even a broken clock and all that sort of stuff, occasionally they get it right.
Occasionally
they get it right.
But very interesting that I think there was quite a bit of push from the Players Association regarding that, and we know that the AFLPA's got a lot of power. Yeah,
well, when they want to wield it, they seem to pick and choose when they want to have a crack. But in this space, well, didn't I see something else that the AFL has done around concussion, Pete? You might have an idea about this. It's your kind of baby. Pete's still not with us. Pete, you might have to
restart.
Yeah, do something.
He's here, but silent.
Yeah, silent. I think there was something that the AFL did recently on concussions anyway, but
yeah, they were looking more into around their concussion protocols, and I think going to actually appoint one person to overlook.
No. It was
a bit more.
It was a percentage of the media rights was going to go towards a fund specifically set up for blokes affected by concussion or retired because of concussion-related symptoms. I think that's what it was.
Sorry, the concussion fund.
I can't be more specific, but I believe that's it. And I think, we're going to see a hell of a lot more in that space over the coming, months and years, because there's a massive liability building there, Nikki.
So just having a quick look at it here. 1% of the TV rights money is, and as possible compensation for concussion victims, and there's apparently some people from the AFL in the UK that are negotiating with the insurance companies to cover the impact of concussion going forward.
Yeah. So we're still trying to. I'm just texting Pete to see what the hell's going on. There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but it just I just was talking, and then all of a sudden there was nothing, and I had to reboot. Yeah. So anyway, I've rebooted, and I'm okay.
My little voice communicator thing, Pete's got a bullshit meter, and if the bullshit goes up too high, it automatically kicks you out. And it must have mistaken you for Nikki. I've got the settings wrong, so I apologise for that.
So apologies to listeners for that.
Anyway, we've gotten through the news, I reckon, Peter. Do we want to have a chat about the weekend's round, shall we?
Let's do it. Yep.
Less than convincing, wouldn't you say?
Less than convincing. I was at the game, as you were, Nikki, and it was a very strange atmosphere on Saturday night for those that were there. I think that the crowd eventually got into it, but you could tell very clearly that it was a sub, early, and tell it earlier that it was a sub 40,000 crowd, and a lot of gaps, and the atmosphere just wasn't really there. And I have to say, Nikki, it was the first time I can remember in a long time hearing our players booed as they played.
Oh yeah.
Was it the third? I think it was the third quarter, maybe.
Yeah. Oh no, a little bit in the second when they started to do a bit of that.
It was the second quarter.
Yeah, when they tried to do the switch and teammates didn't really want to run and help
because because the game was on. St Kilda, we didn't put them away for a while. At that point, it was still a game, and there was some significant unrest in the crowd. And I couldn't help thinking to myself, I thought, if we fall away here and the unthinkable happens, I reckon there'd just about be a riot. Did you?
Oh no, I thought you would have had people leaving at 3/4 time, which they did the weeks before. Yeah, and I'm part of a family that we stay till the very end, and that included during the Robert Shaw years. Yep. And we left early a couple of weeks ago, and that's very, very unusual for us. It stinks a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a little bit on the nose. But anyway, in terms of the game itself, look, unfortunately, Finn, I didn't get to listen to Sunday night, so I didn't hear
you missed the classic
stats and missed the classic.
Yeah.
But it just looked to me another night of our midfield having their pants pulled down. We lost clearances, lost contested ball, but we managed to. And yet I still see Matt Crouch getting 7 coaches' votes. So obviously they saw the game differently to me, but. We just looked again to be, really out on our feet in terms of the midfield, and I was really, really, I was mortified when after everything that's happened the last month, and you're sitting there and you see that we get to the start of the game and you look out there and who's in the centre square for the first bounce? It's Crouch, and Sloane. I'm just thinking,
exactly.
Really, have you not?
They said they weren't going to do
anything.
They must think we're blind because, I am dead set sure that the Crows administration think we're all a bunch of idiots. Because, like you said, Nick, they came out and said, we're not going to play Brad and Matt and Rory in the same rotation and blah, blah, blah. I reckon, definitely at the first bounce, and I reckon probably at the first bounce of every quarter, that was the combination.
Yeah, definitely. Although did you notice that the fact that it seemed like the Crouchers were told they weren't allowed to pass to each other? Because that's what it felt like at the game. That kind of amused me for a little bit, and I think that actually made them slightly more effective than normal.
Yeah, well, it could well have been for the usual backyard handball that they play together, but no, I didn't. Can't say that I noticed it in particular, but we just didn't seem to get much out of our midfield. At all. I thought Brodie Smith, continued his reasonable form, and I think that's been, if nothing else happens this year, then that will have been a successful move.
Only if they stick with it, Pete. Only if
they stick with it.
He should never not be in that mix now. He's shown enough.
No. Yeah, absolutely. And it's sad that it was interesting to hear him through the week mention that it's something that he's always wanted to do and he's always been hassling for, and here we are. He's 27 years of age, and we've finally given him a crack, and he's so hopefully by the time Chase Jones and Jordan Gallucci are 27, 28, we might see them in the midfield. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Well, it's a good point, mate, because who aside from Brodie in the midfield, who do you reckon our biggest success story has been this season? There's probably 2 nominations. O'Brien.
Probably O'Brien.
And maybe a bloke. No. He's maybe, yes, but who else? Down back, all Australian form. Alex
all
Keith.
Australian form and
Keith.
Keithy. Yeah.
So Riley O'Brien, Alex Keith, Brodie Smith. They've all had, I would say, breakout years. Brodie in a new role. And each of those situations have come about through necessity rather than invention. Yep. And it's an indictment on our coaching panel and our selection staff that they are forced into making these changes rather than being inventive enough or showing enough faith in blokes to be able to give them these roles. So we may never have known about... We could have bloody delisted Riley O'Brien next year.
Yep.
So,
and I think Brodie's an interesting one because I can remember over the years. I can remember reading little bits here and there in pre-seasons and things, I can remember previously that he's mentioned about, he's always looked towards wanting to go into the midfield. So we've obviously seen him as being, obviously he had that year out, but we've always seen him as being a necessary part of our half-back line, and that's where he's always played. But there's no doubt that he's been a success in that position, and I'd be very, very surprised now if they if he went back. And what was interesting, I thought too, is that Wayne Miller had 0 time in the midfield on Saturday night and played across half-back, and I wonder if they've now settled on the fact that he needs that Smith moves up and that Miller is the half-back rebounding replacement for Smith, or whether they'll toy with him in midfield again next year. I don't know. I would have liked to have seen the midfield built around Wayne, but maybe Brodie is one to carry it forward.
I know you've got a lot of time for Miller. I don't see a permanent midfield role for him based on current form. I think he would need to have a solid season, I reckon. And I reckon half-back during this part of his development's not a bad spot. You can see the ball coming at him, and he can develop some consistency. He's got the pace we need, and he's got the agility and the delivery that we need in the midfield. But he's too inconsistent for mine. And if we go full rebuild, then maybe you just go with him and let him develop there. I wouldn't be averse to that, but I've always felt that so far he's played his best, most consistent footy off the half-back line, and he should have stayed there.
And he's very much a confidence player, and we saw that at the start of this game, that even though he went back to the back lines where he is more comfortable, he still didn't look quite right. It took him quite a bit into the game before he got back to that level that we know he can play in the back lines. And I think he definitely needs to stay in the back lines. I mean, you spotted it, I think, last year, Fiend, that he has to see the ball coming at him. Then he's a great judge of it. But if he has to be proactive about it, that's where he struggles. And it's just, you can see him when he goes for a punch or whatever and the ball's in the air, he stops and he always looks the wrong way from where the ball's gone. He actually has no awareness.
Yeah, but it could also be
Nick.
It could also be Nick, what group, quote unquote, he's training with.
Yes.
How much time is he spending with the midfield group? How much concerted training in midfield strategy and positioning and running patterns has he had? We don't know any of that, but that could be a factor. And he's got the attributes to be a gun midfielder, no question about it. But I think we've only seen cameos, and I guess time will tell whether he develops enough confidence and enough proactivity, Pete.
No, I absolutely agree with that. He's been, I think, moderately disappointing this year, and that may just well be the fact that, for all the things that you've just said, and maybe they've obviously been trying to make him into a midfielder this year, and so maybe he's just at this point in his career he's just better coming off halfback. And look, if they tried a few things, and we're often critical, but if they've for whatever reason, if they've tried a few things, if they've run a few guys through there, and if out of all of that they've just come up with the fact that, actually Brodie Smith is a really, really good fit and we'll leave him in there, but we need to try something else with Miller, well then that's fine. I've got no issue with that, and hopefully he can get back to some of his best football across half-back. I thought that the interesting one, a maximum 10 coaches votes to Rory Laird, who's been under a lot, he's had a lot of criticism, like they all have. And I have to say that I didn't notice him as playing a particularly great game, but then, I was sitting there with my legs crossed and my arms folded like a big sook, and still having a bit of a tantrum about the month previous. So probably my eyes weren't particularly well open to a good performance. Nicky, how did you see Lairdy's performance?
I must say I just thought he was best of a bad bunch. I didn't see anything that was particularly different to any other week this season, to be honest. Nick, what do you think of the game?
Well, we said that on Sunday night, that it was closer to a return to his All-Australian form, but it still didn't seem quite at that level. but for what he's been dishing up previously, it was quite a step forward. One of the goals that St Kilda got was purely a fuck up on his behalf, which he ran past the ball and then turned back to pick it up instead of picking the ball up and then either dishing it out the back or trying to turn and get it out. But yeah, to me, it was one of the best games he's played this season, but it's still not his best that we know he can do.
I thought Tex had a good game. You couldn't argue with his game. I thought he delivered good things. He picked up 4 coaches' votes, and I thought he did some good things. I think, worryingly, the St Kilda ruckman, I can't think of the kid's name again now.
Rowan Marshall
picked up, I think, 6. I think that's twice in a row that Riley O'Brien has probably had his colours lowered, and I wonder whether he may be due for a spell and whether they'll consider that this week.
Oh, I think it's almost a certainty, Pete, that Riley has a sit down, and it's probably a fair call. He's had a long run. He's a young lad. He's like very physical in the way that he plays. We got Sauce ready. Sauce needs 2 more for his 200. So, we may as well run with that. Well, I'm interested to see what your opinion is of having Darcy in that forward line with Tex. It just, to my eye, and certainly Nicky as well. We talked about this on Sunday night. The forward line looked more dynamic. And again, it seemed like Tex benefited from a bloke, whether it was Fogarty or, the previous time Himmelberg, a bloke who actually understood how to be a forward and create space and lead and present and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a very, when we talk about all the problems we've had in our forward line, I think it's a very, very underrated skill to know how to lead. And Darcy Fogarty is one of the most natural lead-up players you'll ever see. He's got great footy smarts, and he showed that in the first 3 or 4 games he played last year. Yeah, he was a very, very talented lit-up player, and in fact, he's a very, very similar to Taylor Walker, very similar player in a lot of respects. I mean, same height, same build, and that he's that same lead-up player. I don't think he's quite got the field kick that Tex has got, but that may come. But no, I thought that they, at various times, they both led up really, really well, and to have those 2 natural footballers, and that's not a slight on Jenkins, but or Himmelberg for that matter. Although Elliott led up pretty well too. He's quite a natural leader, leader at the ball, not leader of people, if that makes sense. But to have natural leading forwards, I think, does make a lot of difference. In terms of delivery, because we talk about the mess, and you sort of think, well, is it the chicken or the egg? Is it the fact that the midfield aren't delivering properly? Is it the fact that the forwards aren't leading properly? I don't know. I'm sure it's a mix of all of it, but it certainly, we look better on a couple of occasions. Even the fact that Darcy wasn't leading to a goal scoring position, just the fact that he was the next link in the chain. Yeah. And was able to move the ball quickly with the space that he created. It just looked much better. Yeah,
and also, I think,
interesting.
Oh, go on, Nick.
Just on that, the plays of the week thing or whatever the game that the Crows put out, the vast majority of them featured Fogarty during those plays, which I thought was very interesting.
Interesting observation.
Yeah, makes things happen. And you want a bloke that has an impact. And I felt not only do we benefit from him when he had ball in hand, and obviously kicked that wonderful on the run goal where he just took it upon himself, and Lockie Murphy started with his arms outstretched going, what about me, and ended up with his arms outstretched cheering the goal. But just the fact that the movement in the forward line, I think, also allows the small forwards to come into play a little bit more. It also allows for Tex to lead into spaces that Darcy's led out of, etc., etc. I think it's a far more functioning forward line, and it's a very good point that you raised, Pete, because it did look as if our midfield were more confident or had the right options to be able to pass to, rather than being forced to, reject options because they were to bad spots, and they were to bad spots simply because that's where the space was.
Yeah, and I think that this is the really, really important thing as supporters that we have to remember as well, is because when you actually, we saw some lovely things from Darcy, but when you go to the stats, you think, well, actually, didn't have massive, had probably 9 possessions, a goal, and 3 or 4 marks or whatever. As supporters, you can look at it, you can say, well, would Jenkins would of his output been greater than Darcy's on the night? Probably, given the amount of ball that we had. But you have to remember that, we're transitioning a young player who's still a teenager. And so you have to be ready for the ride. And there's not going to be the output. But what you want to see is enough to suggest that, in 2, 3, 4 years' time, that he's going to, to probably double those numbers, which I'm sure he's going to do. So you've got to have a bit of patience with him as well.
We had a brief conversation about this Sunday, Peter, and I'd be interested in your thoughts. I reckon there's a case to have. I know that the Adelaide selection panel have been very heavily focused on trying to make our forward line small and quick, and I don't really think it's worked. And I wonder whether there's a case for us, with the tools that we have available at the moment, to have a forward line that consists of Tom Lynch, Tex Walker, Darcy Fogarty and Elliot Himmelberg, with 2 smalls at their feet.
Well, that's a question without notice, but it's certainly an interesting question. And I just instinctively off the top of my head, I can't, your first thought is, oh no, that sounds really big. But then you sort of, if you actually stop and think about it, you think, well, why not? Because what we've been trying hasn't worked thus far. And could you make that work? You probably could, because Lynch will play higher up the ground.
Yeah, probably Lynch and Tex would play high. You could play Tex a lot higher.
Yep. And you could Darcy's the leading sort of from the goal square out to that mid-range area, and Himmelberg in the goal square, and then giving if Jacobs plays, giving him the chop out. So and the reality is, Fiend, is that you're going to have one of those guys resting on the bench anyway. Yeah,
that's right.
You're probably going to rotate one of those guys off anyway. So you're probably, in all likelihood, your structure is only going to have 3 of those 4 guys at any one time anyway. So you could probably, I think, have a 3-3, but you're sticking with that 3-3 by rotating the 4th guy in, and so you're maintaining that relatively tall structure all the way through the game. Yeah. Whereas if you had 2-4 and you're still sort of rotating, you'd have times where maybe there's only 1.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, that's right. And I reckon our selection committee in retrospect have made a bit of a blue, because I think they've assumed that a smaller forward line will be able to exert more pressure and maintain the ball in forward 50 easier. But I would suggest, and my lad made this, and I think I've mentioned it before, my lad made the observation that a lot of our turnovers are caused through aerial mismatches, and it's got nothing to do with what's happening on the ground. And I wonder whether having those extra marking options, those players who will present in Tex, Lynch and Fogg, will actually be a better option, better fit in terms of being able to maintain the ball, maintain that territory ground that Pikey wants, because we've got more options.
Well, theoretically, sorry, Nicky, jumping in, but theoretically you should get an increase in uncontested marks, and so that's the stat that you'd be looking to bump up. If you're putting those kind of natural lead up forwards, you're looking to bump up rather than the continual, I guess, kicking and hoping for either a contested mark, which is never going to come, let's be honest, and then trying the territory game the way that we have, whether you try and bump up your and that's guys that can naturally find space and be hit up. So yeah, it's a good point that you make, and I see no reason why they won't do it, but I see no reason why it wouldn't work.
Well, the reason, sorry Nick, we're butting you out. I'll shut up in a minute.
No, it's fine, because we talked about quite a bit of this on Sunday, so I'm happy to sit and listen.
Well, what made me think about it, Pete, is the simple fact that we often see Lockie Murphy being a hit up target. And Lockie Murphy, as much as he tries and he jumps like crazy and all the rest of it, he's just not a marking target. And yet so many times our structure seems to, or the way our ball movement occurs or our forward movement occurs, it ends up being Lockie that's the target. And you kind of think to yourself, well, what would we be losing if instead of Lockie being that person, it was a Darcy Fogarty or a Tex Walker? What would we be actually losing? Lockie's not giving us a lot defensively, but we've got two small forward roles. Lockie could sit a bit deeper. But yeah, it just say we turn a lot of ball over because Lachlan Murphy's a marking target.
And we actually did see that working effectively on the weekend with Eddie's mark. As I said this on Sunday, because Darcy was playing out of full forward. He actually had stayed a bit deeper. The ball was coming in, and the Saints were so worried about him getting that mark that they double-teamed him, which allowed Eddie just to come flying in with the flight of the ball and take that great mark that he did. But you also saw other instances where there was the contest that Fogg was kind of being involved with, and Eddie was sitting off to that side and Murphy on the other side in the perfect positions as they should be at small forwards, waiting for that ball to come down. And it did result with a bit of a contest on the ground, etc., the Eddie jumping over them and snapping the goal. So for small sections of it, it worked classically how it should, and we looked, weirdly enough, a lot freer. And even at one stage on the ground, I know we had Otten at full forward, Fogg just a little bit ahead of him, and then you had Lynch and Walker playing up a bit higher, and then I think it was Smith dropping back into the half-forward line, so he's not a short guy either, and Eddie. And it was a really mobile forward line, weirdly, because they're footballers. They're forward footballers who know where to move to the space and create space for their teammates.
And I think the other point is, I think you make a great point, Fiend, is like, what have we got to lose? Because, honestly, if we go over there with the forward structure that we've had the last month, we'll be annihilated. The point I think to look at is, the opposition that you're playing. So you're playing, McGovern, Hearn, Barras, these guys who play the game in the air.
Yep.
And they will, if we go with the same kind of structure, the same, put the ball in, try and make territory, bring it to the ground, blah, blah, they will annihilate us.
Yeah, I agree.
And so if you've got to have some thought going in. And Nicky, you're absolutely spot on. You've got, if you've got two or three natural footballers in there who know how to lead up, then maybe it doesn't work, but Jesus, what's been working so far to go to Perth and play West Coast Eagles?
Yeah, well, and I've been saying for a while, we are very predictable. I reckon if you're the Oppo scout for the week and you got the Crows, you can pretty much pre-write 90% of your report because we don't change it up all that much. And I feel like we've just got opportunities at time to give oppositions different looks and make ourselves a bit harder to play against. And I just feel like if we're going to go over there and beat West Coast, we've got to show them something different, because what we've shown them over the past, certainly after half-time the last time and in previous games recently, it's not been good enough. So
no.
You've got to try something.
I certainly think Darcy Fogarty did enough to maintain his spot. I'm desperately hoping he's not a one up, one down like all of the other kids have been.
Yeah.
So I suspect that he'll keep his spot, particularly with the smoke that's running around Josh Jenkins at the moment. So yeah. I think he'll play, and I think that you've just got to be accept that you're not going to get full impact out of him for probably another 12 to 18 months. But this is what people have to understand is that we can all sit here and we've got to rebuild, we've got to turn the list over and all the rest of it. Well, yet that we do, but you have to understand that means that you've got to stick with these kids.
Yeah.
And you've got to back them in, and you've got to be prepared to go to the football and bear your guts out for them, even though you're probably going to lose. the joy of it is going to be sitting through and watching those kids develop over
That's
a period of probably 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think that where the joy has gone from supporters is because you know, with the experienced players that we've got, you're not going to get a premiership, and you're not riding with them. You're not, attaching yourself to their development to see something at the end, because
we've already done that, Pete, haven't we? We've attached ourselves to the development of this squad over the period of probably 6 or 7 years.
Exactly.
And they got close and failed, and since then it's been a fairly rocky road, a bit of a roller coaster. And I think you're exactly right. I don't think we're no longer engaged with this squad. And, so what? We're only supporters. I'm sure if they started beating West Coast by 100 points, we'd be engaged pretty quick. But that's not going to happen. And so whilst a bloke like David McKay, who I thought was very good on the weekend, albeit against St Kilda, no one can get enthusiastic about DMAC, because we know that he's a 12 to 15 possession player. We would be far more enthusiastic with a Shoal across halfback.
Of course we would.
We follow that young lad, Richard Douglas, who's
Is he like that young Dougherty we used to have?
Oh, Jesus. Or that young Brent Riley. Now Dougie had a very up and down game, but he did some really good things. And I would suggest on the back of the performance against St Kilda, he won't be dropped again for the rest of the season. I can't get excited about that, because I know what Richard Douglas will bring at the pointy end, because there's enough evidence on the table. So you're dead set right. You're dead set right, Peter. Until the squad gets turned over, I think everyone bar the club itself can see that this club, or this squad as it is right now, is not going to deliver a flag. And I would much rather see us developing kids and struggling for a while, and seeing those young lads develop into a hard unit that is really like a Richmond, than I would seeing the same old shit week after week.
So that's my opinion on Darcy. I thought overall he showed enough that you would give him another game, and he certainly showed enough to say that he's going to be, a great player in the future. That's another reason why I want, I've been tracking, Jack McCosh's year this year, and he's just built sort of steadily. And, you just have to accept that there's ups and downs, and there's weeks that, last weekend he got 10 possessions. This week he was brained him. And so you got to ride with that and see the quality for what it is, but accepting that it's not going to be there every minute of every game. So anyway, he was good. Was there anybody else that I wanted to talk about? I thought Jake Kelly had another decent game, and I think that he's had a good season.
He has.
Do you think he's going to make top 10 in the BNF?
Yeah, I reckon he will.
Has to.
Yeah, I think he absolutely has to.
I think he's had a good year.
And that'll actually help, because if he is looking to go back to Collingwood to play with his brother, which we know the desire is there, and I'd be sad to lose him because I really do love Bull. But that gives him Bull. His nickname's Bull.
Bull. Yep. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
I thought Bull.
He goes. No, Bull. Yeah, Bull, he goes like a bull at the gate.
No, I remember that. Yep.
That does give him a nice little bit of step up in currency, because he's been incredibly consistent this year.
Yeah.
He's been one of our shining lights, I actually think.
Yeah, in fact, actually, Feen, when you said to me the three players that you think have been, successful in their roles this year, and I was going to almost jump in and say Jake Kelly, but I wasn't sure if I might get my head bitten off, so I didn't.
Not with me.
So I think he's had a good year. I've been very happy with him. So I thought he had another good game on the weekend.
Yeah.
What was Kyle Hartigan doing, though?
Oh, my God. Delayed concussion, I reckon.
No, he injured his ankle like in the first couple of minutes, and you could see him when he was trying to jog. There was a really noticeable limp, Pete.
Yeah,
and it was just that thrill. When they actually switched him off of Membry, he did better.
And
because normally he can go with Membry, but he just didn't have the pace anymore to go with it because of the ankle.
I was looking at the footage again, Nick, and I was watching him limp and run around limping, and it occurred to me that it was probably shaking his brain because he was, limping, and so he probably did end up suffering concussion, which would explained his atrocious decision-making and foot skills. Come on, Nick. Now,
Have you turned into Macca?
Yeah, I thought I'd just give it a bit of a spray. Now, look, Tommy Clark on Facebook chat, and thanks for joining us, Tommy, on Facebook chat. Here's a stat for you. Since 2000, the Crows have won the 4th most games of any AFL club. Only Geelong, Hawthorn and Sydney have won more, and they have 9 premierships between them.
Thanks, Tommy. It's been great to have your participation.
Now I'm depressed.
You really enjoyed your contribution, Tommy. Thanks for that.
Yeah,
I feel much better now. Where's that scotch that I...
Oh, wow. How's that, eh?
Well, that tells you that we've had quality. It's just...
No, it doesn't. No,
frustrating.
It shows
we know how to win at home.
We've had the most brutal, mentally fragile squad since 2000. The club should be embarrassed by that. Come on. That's an embarrassing stat.
It's not one to be proud of at all.
No.
And I'm sure Tommy didn't put it up there as kudos. It was to say, geez,
yeah,
how the hell does that happen?
Yeah, I'm going to tweet that, Tommy. That's amazing. Yeah, thanks for counting. Anyway, look, we've got West Coast this week. What's the thoughts?
Loss. Yeah, by how much though?
It's only by how much. It's the whole point about this Sunday. It's Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is really how much our percentage is going to be damaged. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at. If we can be competitive, and score reasonably, and go down by 2 to 5 goals, then not too much damage. If we end up with a 40 to 50 point loss with a low score, we're in a world of pain. And particularly if Port play Sydney and have a flat track win over them, which I suspect they will, and if they win by 30 or 40 points, keep Sydney to a reasonably low score.
I don't know. Sydney seems to be coming good at the end of the year. They really pushed GWS.
Yeah.
And if Port have had that big win, and if they do their little bounce,
well,
like they have been.
Yeah, I mean it's possible, but I would be surprised. I think it's more likely that they might lose to North away in 2 weeks' time. That's possible, but even so, we still need to win a couple. So, look, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Look, you just can't see it, and one of the reasons you can't see it is just that their forward line now with Rioli, Ryan, and Cameron. I mean, bloody hell, who's going to take those guys?
Yeah,
and then you've got Darling and Kennedy. I mean, it's just a forward line
Luke
to die for. So Brownie take. I mean, Brownie and Jake Kelly, honest toilers, but geez, against those guys.
Well, and let's not forget
look at their midfield. Shuey and bloody, all these guys.
Far more dynamic. I mean, if they
get, it's a premiership team.
If they get enough service into their forward lines, then they'll kick a winning score. We know that Tars has trouble with Kennedy. Hardigan's been struggling. Keith won't be back, I don't think.
No, they said he will.
Oh, he is going to be back, but he might be short of
He'll
a run.
be back. Hardigan has a test.
So it could be Hardigan for Keith, which means that Otten stays in, and that doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence, although Andy rarely makes mistakes. He's also, not that much of a matchup for someone like a Jack Darling.
They'll go back-to-back, Fane. They'll go back-to-back West Coast. They have got a beautifully balanced, strong team on every single line. There's just no weaknesses in that side, and they will go top again. And as I said, if I look at it this way, if we have our absolute best performance we've had in the last 6 weeks, if we can really put it all together, we can catch them on an off day. Maybe we get within 3 or 4 goals.
Well, the thing for West Coast too is that they're playing for home finals now. Geelong have given them a sniff. Brisbane are coming, Richmond are coming. So they're playing now for top 2. They've got us, Richmond and Hawthorn. You'd imagine they'd be looking at us and Hawthorn as the 2 winnables, and the Richmond one will be a real litmus test. Richmond on a bit of a tear right now. So they secured their 2 home wins. There's a more than slight chance that they snaffle top spot, or at least top 2. So they'll be on their game, absolutely on their game. If they're not fired up and ready to go for this one, there's something wrong.
This is absolutely critical for them. Critical, no question about it. So there's no chance of catching them napping.
No.
I think it'll get. I honestly, and I'm not. I know that we've been negative and all of that kind of stuff, but I just. I actually feel reason. I think that we're a chance against Collingwood the week after. I think this weekend will get ugly. I really do.
Yeah, I'm probably expecting. At the end of the day, I think our effort against St Kilda was promising. I feel like our intensity was back, but I think we can't underestimate how bad St Kilda were. If they used the ball properly and if they took their chances, it quite possibly beat us. And they're 15th on the ladder. So we've got a West Coast team that are pretty much full strength, barring 1 or 2, on their home deck with 3 games to go before the finals. It's business end. They've got top 2 on the line. I think we'll try, but I think we'll get brushed aside by a bigger, stronger, faster, more hungry
I've heard that
team.
song before.
Yeah.
Just beaten up by a
powerful team. Well, I think we're going to get beaten up by a powerful team. That's the way I look at it. And if they're the benchmark, then I don't think it'll be a matter of form. I think it'll be a matter of personnel. I just think line by line, they've got better personnel.
The other thing, there is currently a percentage point difference between and Brisbane.
You're just dropping in and out there, Pete, so you might want to just quickly restart.
Percentage in West Coast and Brisbane.
Pete? Pete?
Hang on.
You might just want to restart, mate. You're dropping in and out.
Will do.
But yeah, you're right. It's there's not much of a gap between Brisbane and West. Maybe.
All I was going to say is that percentage is really tight with West Coast and Brisbane.
Yes, absolutely.
And so West Coast will see this as an absolute necessity that they build a bit of percentage out of this game. They'll be looking at this as a percentage game.
Well, and not only that, Richmond have got Carlton this week, and they're only 2 percentage points behind as well. So they could join in that little percentage fest. And GWS, despite being a game back, their percentage is better than the 3 above them at 122. So all GWS have got to do is to keep winning, and they're joining that party as well. So it could be a very tight finish for top 4. Brisbane are the ones that really make that interesting. So West Coast will be. You can't see West Coast not being engaged.
Put it this way: the round 22 game at the Gabba between Brisbane and Geelong is going to be very interesting. And the following week, Brisbane travel down to play Richmond on the MCG. Yeah. So I mean, they've got some. Well, they've got the Suns this week, so you figure that one's going to be a win. But there's those 2 games which I think are really going to shape the 8 a lot.
And the Richmond West Coast game too on the same weekend as Brisbane Geelong. It's going to be a big round of footy, that one.
So I think for all of those reasons, I just can't see us getting in the same postcode as West Coast this weekend.
Yeah, I have to agree, Pete. I think it's going to be a 7 or 8 goal mauling, and I'm probably being conservative there. Nikki, what do you reckon?
Agree.
No, I think that's, I think that we can expect to see that. What sort of reaction does the club get on the back of a 10-goal loss on Sunday?
They'll back the boys in though, won't they?
I think there'll be enough to say, well, it was West Coast over there.
Mm.
Until we've actually not made the 8, Pete, I think it'll be too easily battered away.
Yeah.
You know, I think the drums will be beating when after the Collingwood game if we lose it. But I think, and not that I wish this on the club, but if we don't make the 8, I think that's when the noise will be too loud for the club to ignore.
Because I think this time next week we're looking at the table and we're out of the 8 this time next week, because Portal beat Sydney by 4 or 5 goals, and there's only 2 percentage points difference, and I think that we'll get smacked enough. I think we'll be out of the 8 this time next week.
Nick.
Yep. No. Agree.
Yep. And you know,
and for me, for the club to move ahead as it needs to. As much as I hated it, I actually thought it probably would have been best for the future if we actually lost the game against St Kilda.
And you know, isn't that a bad thing? Because you would expect that the club is.
It's horrible to feel that.
But you would expect that the club would be realistic enough to know that even if they do end up making the 8, that they should be able to analyse a group of players to the extent that they should know where this list is at. So it shouldn't need us to, you know, miss the 8, and then the club's got to go into PR mode, and then they've got to make a few token trades, and then they've, you know, it shouldn't need that. We're supposedly building, and we're on a journey towards, you know, the best football department in the land, which includes recruiting staff and selection and all the rest of it, list management. You know, why does it take drastic circumstances for our club to do these things? It just smacks of unprofessionalism.
Also, partly why I was feeling that way was that there is a large section of our supporter base who do the whole, but we might make the finals, you've got to support the boys, you've got to back the boys in. For me, it was trying to get them to actually open their eyes a little bit and realise that there are issues, and to not be just happy with turning up.
I think that there'll be a stark contrast on Sunday, because I think we'll sit down and we'll watch a team that is genuinely contending for finals, and a team that is not. It'll be stark.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pete. I think it'll be laid bare, but I think because it's over there, it's going to take one more week.
Yep.
And that's the sad reality. And that's my bugbear. And Nikki, you're dead set right. You know, I mean, I must say, and for people listening, our open letter / petition to the club is still going. So if you haven't signed it yet and you wish to, or if you have some mates that feel the same but haven't signed it yet, please go to the links that we've bandied around on social media at aflcrowcast.com. Have a look at the lead article there, follow that link, and you'll get to the petition. But what surprised me is the amount of activity and engagement we've had on that particular initiative, and how much support, blind, I'm gonna call a spade, how much blind support for the club there is, how much we're still in the 8 there is, how much, you know, back the boys in through thick and thin there is. And you know, that's all right.
Wasn't there a comment that was made which was, I don't care if they don't win as long as they play good football?
Yeah. And look, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I'm not going to sit here and tell people how they should support their club. I don't agree with those types of comments, but that's people's prerogatives. But I think,
yeah, it is.
I think the club has a very, very educated eye on the various sectors of the supporter base. And I think the club knows darn well that probably the largest section of our supporter base is a section of people who will follow the club through thick and thin. Their definition of supporting the club is to not query or question or criticise, but to just support. And as I said, I'm not criticising, that's just how people choose to do it. But I think the club knows that that's the largest sector of our supporter base. And so when they're looking at who they're going to disaffect the most, that's, if you're not going to do anything that's going to disassociate 50 or 60% of your supporter base, are you?
I think they would have. I think that the crowd on the weekend would have to have been a surprise for a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Still contesting finals, and let's be honest here. If St Kilda had won that, if St Kilda had won that, they've got the easiest draw of the lot.
Yeah,
in the last three games.
Yeah,
they could have ended up on 12 wins. They could still end up on 11 wins. They could have ended up on 12 wins if they'd won that. So that was actually a genuine, without wanting to, upplay it too much. That was a genuine finals fight.
Yep.
On the weekend, and it was a Saturday night game, and it was a sub 40,000. Now, how many sub 40,000 games have we had at Adelaide Oval?
Oh, can't remember the last one.
You got to look at GWS on Mother's Day and those kind of games, or Easter Sunday. Even then, I think Easter Sunday, I think we're getting over 40 for Gold Coast on Easter Sunday. But it was a very, very below par crowd.
Yeah. But the problem with that, Pete, is that the club has got a waiting list of 15,000 people for those seats.
Yep.
People that have been rocking up all year, the club will probably go, oh yeah, they're a bit jaded, blah, 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 it was St Kilda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They can say those things because when was the last time we needed to have a membership drive? 1990, I reckon, for about 5 minutes.
And as I said to Nikki off air before we started, that low crowd will be papered over next home game because it'll be Collingwood.
Exactly, and, right.
They'll get 45 to Collingwood without even trying.
Yeah. And I can tell you right now that if someone on a waiting list gets offered a Crows membership, they'll take it because they've been waiting.
Oh, definitely.
They've been waiting 5 years.
Yep.
So, yeah. But, I mean, you're right. It was a statement, but I don't think it's a statement that they would necessarily take a huge amount of notice of because, as Andrew pointed out in our little chat, and we have to apologise to people who are listening, the questions and interviewers still with the club, waiting to be greenlit. Ian Shuttleworth got in touch with me during the week and apologised and said, obviously busy week, blah, blah, blah. I'm hopeful that we'll have this fabled interview and list of answers that are probably irrelevant now before 2022. But I can't promise. So it's very unfortunate. We've had the interview in the can for a month now, longer. The questions have been with the club for that period of time. So that's all we can do. But yeah, Andrew Fagan said when a question was raised about attendances, he was very quick to ask for, understanding and that it's a longer term trends that they look at, and there are season by season differences in the draw that have impacts on attendances, etc., etc. So I think they'll quite easily write this one off.
Yeah,
and he is actually right to a degree for some of that. So things like of when games are played as to whether our country members can come down, etc., and things like that. So it does. So he is kind of right in a way about longer term trends, but it was a very different feel that I haven't experienced at a Crows game for a very long time.
No, I couldn't agree more, Nikki. I felt exactly the same way.
Anyway,
unfortunately, no Sandford game to talk of this weekend, unfortunately. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, no, look, and I think we're all agreed we're up against it this week. So, but we will obviously keep supporting until we're mathematically no longer in it.
Correct.
Now we're not going to do competitions this week because Donk's not
time
here.
For some cockwombles.
Nikki. Righto then. Go for it.
For me, the standout has to be Dylan Clark from Essendon for kicking the wrong way in a match into Port Adelaide's forward line. That's vastly amusing. I did see DSG nominated Jared Healy for saying that Richard Douglas is a star and couldn't understand why he was dropped.
Welcome to 2012, Jared. Has he been in a coma?
Yep. But the main one for me was that the kicking the wrong way. That was just hysterical. The stadium audio going out before the game on Saturday night was kind of interesting. And I thought, oh, here's an omen. It did take them a while to fix whatever it was. And possibly, I think that the icing on the cake is 2 years too late, but the AFL, with their AFLX finally going, yeah, this didn't really work.
Yeah. Actually, Nikki, as you mentioned that, it was something I forgot to talk about in the podcast, was the fact that, there was the no songs and there was the audio problems, and that I think that probably added to the kind of eerie atmosphere that there was at the ground on Saturday night. I've got one nomination, and I'm looking for a little bit of latitude to go outside of sport.
If you're gonna, I think I know who you're going to say. Go on.
Do you?
Go on.
I'm going to nominate English opening batsman Jason Roy.
Yes.
Did you know?
You stole my cockwomble.
Did I? I'm sorry, mate.
Oh wow! Because what a shot!
And you know what? It wasn't just how bad that shot was and what an idiot he was for playing that shot. It was the still photograph that I saw afterwards. I saw it this morning actually on social media, and it was a still photograph. I can't remember which media outlet that got it, but it was him as he was walking off, and a nice, great, big, ghouly spit at the Australian crowd as he was walking off the ground, because he was obviously getting a mouthful from the Australian crowd.
Quality lad.
He is a quality lad, Jason Roy. He's obviously got it all going on upstairs as Big Jason. Yeah. So he, for me, is a clear candidate. Sorry to steal that one off your feet.
No, that's all right. I could have parked my car in the gap between his bat and pad. It was just horrendous, and it was the one. It was the trigger, wasn't it? You could probably give a cockwomble to the English cricket team as a collective, because we were 8 for 122 on day one, and we ended up beating by 250 runs.
Oh, no.
I do think that the groundskeepers staff at Edgbaston who decided to put up the previous the results previously on the scoreboard when we turned up to train, that didn't work out so well for them.
Yeah.
Well, if you put, you could put our 8 for 122 and then go to their first innings of 1 for 154.
Yeah.
And you just think, how the hell did that translate into? But I also think we should nominate every single person who attended every single day and sat in the holly stands. They should all be nominated. However many thousand of them they are, they should all be nominated for just being general dickheads. I've actually sat and watched cricket in that stand, and it's 50% funny and 50% want to get into a fight. That's really
it's kind of just dancing on that line, is it?
It dances right on that line, particularly at around about.
So half of them are trying to be a soccer crowd.
It's very much a soccer crowd. If you ever go and watch cricket there, it is like being at the soccer.
Yeah, well, look, we're digressing away from footy, but it's worth talking about. It was just a massive result. England I think their selections were arrogant, don't you, Pete? I mean, Moeen Ali, he hasn't taken a wicket for 6 months, I don't reckon. Anderson wasn't fit, and they picked him.
That was a ridiculous decision, and he rightly apologised to his teammates because he passed fitness tests, but really he shouldn't have played. And I think that they were just enamoured with their World Cup win and their World Cup team, and they've they do funky things like Butler keeps in the one dayers, but Bairstow keeps in the tests, and then Bairstow misses stumpings, and it's all a bit funky, isn't it, with the Poms? I think they've they're rock stars over there at the moment, the Poms, and I think that they got well and truly put in their box. And I think you're right. There's a lot of arrogance with their selection, and I think that they've hitched their wagon to the one day kind of players. And what you saw, and actually the commentators pointed it out. You've got guys like Josh Butler in there who can come in at 3 for 200 and suddenly make it 3 for 600 in a day, but they've not picked a team to bat out day 5 in a test match at all. No. You can see the techniques were terrible.
Yeah, and look, got to say, I reckon that's the best all-round bowling performance that I've seen from an Australian side for a long time. Cummins and Pattinson and even Sids along with Lyon.
All good.
They did they had a couple of flat spells, but overall they were on the money. From start to finish, they put a lot of pressure on the English batsmen, I thought, and as you rightly say, the Poms went up to it. Now, Peter Price in the chat has just referred to a Big Footy post that was posted today by someone that says they attended the captain's run this morning, the function this morning, and Andrew Fagan announced 2 big positive announcements will be made this week. After the week of copying it, he doesn't want them to be glossed over. Otherwise, would have announced them this week. Says, can guarantee Crows fans will be happy with them. So I'd like to thank Brett Burton for his service to the club. And, good luck at your next gig at Anytime Fitness. And Benny Hart, probably time to get a real job. Clearly, they're going to be the 2 big positive announcements.
Great. Good news.
Anyway, look, I reckon we should just about finish it up there. We've been crapping on for the last 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
I'll just say that I will agree with you, boys. No, as the winner of the Cockwomble, I'll agree to give it to the English cricket team, just overall for that whole thing. Because I knew Pete was going to be very chuffed.
Very good. Well, thanks to everyone who joined us on Spreaker. It was excellent engagement. Once again, we're up over 600 comments. You guys amaze me. Thanks to those who listen to us on Facebook and on YouTube. Don't think we'll have a rev up this week because my son's up in sunny Queensland and no one wants to listen to me talk by myself. So we might have to can that one. But we will be back on Sunday for the wrap. Now, it's a Sunday afternoon show, isn't it, Nikki? So the wrap will be the normal time at 7 p.m.
Yep, will be.
Very good. Thanks very much to Ryan at Smith Partners Real Estate. Thanks also to Down to Earth Electrical. Thanks to Scorpus. Thanks to our patrons. If you want to get around us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/AFL CrowCast. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Nikki. We'll catch you later on.
Thanks, Pete.
Good chat. See you, mate.